Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and Joe Hoyt. Yeah, that's you. First of all, fellas, welcome into the week. Kind of been a bad weekend for the local pro sports teams. The Rangers, which we'll talk about in a little bit, just lost like crazy. 7 games in a row, Evan. That's a collapse of monumental proportions.
I'd say you have to be in real position to capitalize to have a collapse. I'm not sure I ever believed the Rangers were in real position.
Okay, so you're saying if you were on the bottom rung, if you're on the bottom rung already and you fall, it's not that bad of a fall.
It's not that deep of a fall. Yeah, not that high of a fall.
We'll talk about that more later. But then the Cowboys collapse. Maybe that's not that deep of a fall either, considering what we had for them going before the season in our predictions. Most people saying 8 or 9 wins. But I tell you, Joe, watching these first 3 games has been brutal. This defense. I'm trying to remember the last time I saw a Cowboys defense this bad. But before we get into that, we need to go ahead and update what the injury situation is, because it is fairly significant this time.
Yeah, extremely significant. CeeDee Lamb was the one we knew that was going to potentially be a problem. They put him in the backfield, which, Brian Schottenheimer and Jerry Jones have kind of echoed this, and I kind of agree with this. I think you want to get the ball in the hands of your best playmakers, so I have no problem personally doing that. CeeDee Lamb gets hurt on a weird tackle. They're looking into it as potential hip drop tackle, in kind of hindsight there. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. But he's going to be out at least 2 weeks is kind of what the prevailing knowledge is. Could be 3, could be 4. They believe they avoided serious injury there with that high ankle sprain. One thing Jerry Jones talked about today was, in terms of these timelines, it kind of comes down to the player, and he used the word toughness in terms of how quickly they can kind of start their rehab again. If the pain is too significant early on, that could delay things. But if they're able to kind of start the rehab early, and I know CeeDee Lamb has been diligent in that regard, and he's also shown a willingness to be tough, they think that this could be on the shorter end of a timeline rather than a longer one. And then Tyler Booker was the surprise. This is a guy that played every single snap. I saw him in the locker room. I thought he looked fine after the game. No kind of serious sounding of the alarm reasons there. And then it comes out the next day that he also has a high ankle sprain, could be out 4 to 6 weeks. It's hard to pinpoint. No one really even knows. I don't think the Cowboys know for sure when that occurred. I did find one play, the second to last play of the game, where Miles Sanders runs into him. His ankle kind of plants weird, and then a Bears defender also kind of falls on him a little bit. That kind of came up. He came up a little bit awkward after that, but played the next play, which ended up being a Joe Milton interception. Long story short, the Cowboys are now out 2 offensive linemen due to high ankle sprains for at least the next month, probably. They're out their best receiver, probably their best player in CeeDee Lamb. They're going to have to make things happen on offense to kind of complement a defense that has been historically bad in new ways that are kind of unfamiliar to this Cowboys team from years past. I pointed to this. After 3 weeks last season, we were saying, hey, this might be the worst run defense in the NFL. Well, after 3 weeks in this season, we might be saying, hey, this might be the worst passing defense in the NFL. It's funny how kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul works out with trading Micah Parsons away for Kenny Clark.
Hey, Joe, I just want to qualify something. You said that high ankle sprain update came via Jerry, correct?
For who?
That CeeDee's high ankle sprain update was via Jerry, right?
That came. Schottenheimer indicated that Stephen Jones said it too. So everyone's kind of on the same page there.
Because I just wanted to add our weekly qualifier in there. If it comes from Jerry, then you can't believe it, because it's all fairy tales. But other than that, let's move along.
Yeah, I'm thinking that Joe. I thought that Tyler Booker's ego would have been damaged severely when he got run over there late in the game. There was a play where he ended up on his back, which that's not exactly the way you want to see your first round draft pick end up. And that was a little humiliating. But other than that, I am a little confused, Joe, by the fact that an offensive lineman got a high ankle sprain and they're 4 to 6 weeks. CeeDee Lamb, a wide receiver who really his whole game is built on his speed and quickness, 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to potentially when they're able to start, kind of what Jerry was alluding to. But that is kind of a unique thing. I do believe that in terms of high ankle sprains, they believe there's kind of degrees to this, and they believe CD was on the lower end. The Booker thing, I think we're still kind of figuring out a little bit. I know with Cooper Beebe, for example, who's the other offensive lineman out, that there was more to it than just the high ankle sprain. There was it was like a low high ankle sprain, but also a lateral sprain. There were some other details kind of involved there. But he's also a guy in terms of the toughness barometer. They're kind of banking on him kind of coming back on the early end of that timeline. So I would imagine that him and Tyler Booker's timelines are similar in terms of being in sync.
All right, now let's
Yeah,
look
and
at the.
Kevin, I mean, on high ankle sprains, when you're talking about an offensive lineman and weight bearing, it's a different thing than with a receiver, even though the receiver's cutting a lot more dramatically. I'm with you. I think that it's going to be on the longer end for CD to get back than what has been estimated, because I don't recall seeing a guy come back in 2 weeks from a high ankle sprain.
No, no, absolutely not. I don't believe that either. I think 4 weeks minimum. Um, and I have a degree, a doctoral degree. If y'all didn't realize that.
In what field is that, Kevin?
In homeopathy, I think that's what it was, or something like that. I'm not sure what it was. Let's look at the schedule here, because they obviously got the Packers this week and a certain Micah Parsons, and so the offensive line has already been struggling a little bit, especially in its pass protection. Joe, the run blocking has been very good, obviously, and they've done a great job. I got to say, I give the Cowboys all the props in the world for Javonte Williams. I take back everything I said. I didn't say anything bad about Javonte Williams other than the Broncos gave up on him. Why should we think he'd be any good? Well, he's been terrific. I think he's the best running back the Cowboys have had since Ezekiel Elliott in his prime, and I include Tony Pollard in that. I never really thought of Tony Pollard as a running back. I don't think Memphis thought of him as a running back when he was in college. He was just kind of a very skilled player who could catch passes and run, but not really the kind of guy you want to just turn around and stick the ball in his stomach and send him into the line. Javonte Williams is that running back. He's terrific. And so I will take exception, Joe, with you on the thing. I do have a problem with lining up, Kavontae Turpin and CeeDee Lamb in the backfield, simply because you're now talking about different personnel coming after them. He got tackled. He got landed on by a linebacker. In the open field in the secondary, he's more or less going to most of the time be facing people who are a little smaller than that. Not saying that was a freak play the way he got tackled, but to me, if I've got Javonte Williams running the ball this well, I want to give him the ball, and I want to give him the ball more than 10 times. I realize that in that game, that kind of the situation dictated that because they got so far behind. But my gosh, it's like they couldn't stop him. Every play, he's getting 5, 6, 10 yards.
Yeah, the one caveat I'd say, just kind of adding to the CeeDee Lamb thing, the Bears defense had shown the first 2 weeks just kind of an inability to kind of handle outside runs. And one thing Javonte Williams has been fantastic at is yards after contact, but mostly kind of inside prevailing runs, powers, kind of things with pulling guards. I think that they were trying to get some juice outside and to kind of exploit that weakness with Chicago. And the argument also be made, well, why don't you have Jaden Blue up for that reason, right? That is in terms of the speed capability, that's someone you want. They haven't seen enough from him yet to kind of say, hey, we're going to put you instead of Miles Sanders. So they were trying to replicate that, I believe, with CD. Again, risk reward, I do think there's an argument there, but I think free play kind of makes things kind of look at that a little bit differently. But Javonte Williams, to your point, Kevin, has been fantastic. The one thing I wondered when they signed him, because he wasn't good the last 2 seasons coming off the ACL. Denver said, hey, thank you for your service. We'll see you later. But his rookie season, he was fantastic. And I was trying to kind of figure out why that was. Was it just an ACL thing? Was it just, hey, he hasn't been the same version of himself as his rookie season? The one thing I noticed was if you look at the Bears offense before Sean Payton, that was the case his rookie season, the Broncos, and after, there was a lot of similarities to what Brian Schottenheimer likes to do and Clayton Adams like to do in his rookie season in terms of kind of some of the power run games and kind of running up the middle. I think this offense is better suited for him. He had 61 yards after contact last game, so he was averaging over 6 yards a carry after contact. He is a bowling ball. He's tough. He wanted to go to college as a linebacker. He didn't want to play running back, but college just told him you were too small to play linebacker. And you can see that physicality and that willingness to kind of bring impacts in his game, as a former linebacker, now running back. He's someone that I think could be a key factor in this game against the Packers, because the one thing the Cowboys have been peddling since the Micah Parsons trade is this idea that they were never going to win with Micah Parsons because they couldn't stop the run. And how do you get rid of a good, or kind of eradicate a good pass rush? You run right at it. And I think that that's going to be one thing they're going to try to do in this game, is send Javonte Williams right after the places where Kenny Clark used to be and where Micah Parsons lines up.
So tell me this: who's going to block Micah Parsons?
In terms of the edge, I think he'll have a great insight on how to handle Terrence Steele and Tyler Guyton, who have struggled in pass protection. And this is going to definitely be just the glass 3/4 full look, at this. But Tyler Guyton has been taking strides. He's not as bad as he was last year, but right now he's still someone that Micah Parsons could have a great game against, frankly.
Yeah, I don't see him. That's just the problem, is that Terrence Steele has always been a run blocker first, right? Not his pass block was not his forte. And Tyler Guyton is, he had a complete whiff in the game last week. And that's the thing here in this market. We're used to Hall of Fame caliber play at left tackle, right? I mean, it has been phenomenal. And so to come down from that to this, I think at some point here, if Tyler Guyton does start picking things up, I know they love Tyler Smith at left guard, but I tell you, I think that you're going to have to keep your quarterback upright. So let's talk about that a little bit, because of what happened last week and what the Cowboys want to be in their offense. We know that Ryan Schottenheimer wants to run the ball and he wants to take shots downfield. Well, in the game last week, everybody's talking about why didn't they take more shots downfield. Well, to me, it was like the Bears know they can't run now, right? Because they're 17 points down here in the third quarter, so they're going to have to throw. But we'll just drop two guys deep, right? We'll drop our safeties, and then that's that. So to me, it's like I don't want Dak throwing the ball downfield, in those situations when there's nothing there, right?
No, yeah, you don't, and it's just, it wasn't there. I mean, I talked with, this was my column after the game, was centered around this idea. Once you lose CeeDee Lamb, what happens? Well, that was a guy that was going to be double covered, and the Cowboys game plan for this to be double covered almost every single pass play, right? So by losing CeeDee Lamb, you not only lose your star player, you're basically giving the Bears another cover guy to go out there and say, hey, we're going to kind of handle this zone coverage a little bit better, and that's what they did. I talked with Kevontae Turpin with us after the game. He's like, all they were running was too high man and deep cover two. Like, they were just saying, hey, we are not going to get beat deep. We're going to let you dink and dunk to Jake Ferguson. And that's why I think you see a game where he has 13 catches for just over 80 yards, because that was the only option there. I know George Pickens is a guy that if he's covered, he's not covered, but there was nothing there. And add in the fact that, the offensive line was allowing pressure. Dak Prescott didn't have a lot of time to do it either. I think that's going to be their biggest challenge this week is how do we kind of get out front early? How do we control the ball? How do we bring some of these safeties and linebackers up by running the ball and then doing play action off of it? And that's the only way I think you're going to kind of alleviate the loss of CeeDee Lamb. I would expect them to run the ball a lot. I was talking with Brock Hoffman after the game, or actually yesterday, and he kind of told me, he's like, hey, I thought we were doing a really good job moving the ball, like moving guys off the line of scrimmage in the running game. And clearly the numbers showcase that too. But when the Bears come out and have a 19-play drive that takes 10 minutes off the clock, and next thing you know, you're down by 3 possessions, you can't really afford to run the ball as like they wanted to. So I think that's going to be a big emphasis this week, is getting out in front and sticking to the run.
All right, I've got one question, and then I'd like to look at the schedule going forward. And I know this is kind of piling on, but what does this say, Joe? I mean, I know you had written a little bit about Eberflus, facing the Bears, where he had coached for a while. But what does it say about his particular set of skills, that he knew that Bears personnel as well as anybody and wasn't able to potentially scheme any better against that group?
I think it's a great point, and I think it kind of goes back to the idea that one of the things that they talked about when they traded Micah Parsons was, hey, you can't scheme run defense, but you can scheme pass rush. And you even saw early on in that game, they ran 2 pressures in the first 3 plays. which was very uncharacteristic for Matt Eberflus defenses. And that resulted in a TFL and a short dink and dunk pass that led on third down that led to an early punt, 3-and-out, right? I think that they kind of got away from that. But I'll say this about the Matt Eberflus defense right now. It is kind of a disaster of epic proportions so far, to be honest with you.
I like it. Kind of a disaster. Maybe not a complete disaster, but
you can eliminate the kind of in that. That was me just thinking of the right words to say, because it has been an epic disaster. I watch film after this game, and you go look at the DJ Moore touchdown. I think this is probably the best example of this. And you can't tell if they're in man or zone, to be honest with you. Like, you have guys that are running man coverage concepts. And I know in zone coverage, you can have vision zone, which is looking at the quarterback the whole time, right? And then match concepts where you have guys running, kind of matched up in similar man coverage things. There were guys running across the field with other guys doing vision zone on that play where you don't know what they're doing. And I think that's the biggest problem. There's so many of these zone coverage busts right now. Take out the Trayvon Diggs and touchdown that he allowed when he slipped and tried to do jam coverage, which Schottenheimer, by the way, kind of alluded to this. He wasn't supposed to be that tight in press coverage. If he was the only one in press man on that one, everyone else was far back. It was 3rd and 8. Next thing you know, he goes press man, does a jam and bail concept, slips and falls. Next thing you know, easy 35-yard touchdown. I think Jerry Jones used the word perfect storm with this defense right now. And I think that that's kind of a good way to encapsulate it, because everything you could think that could possibly go wrong with this pass defense feels like it's going wrong. Zone defense, in the words of Jerry Jones, is supposed to be a safe defense. They are giving up more big plays than anyone in the NFL outside Miami.
Yeah, I mean, you said you looked at film and you lost me there, because I all I needed to do was look at Russell Wilson's performance against the Cowboys and Caleb Williams' performance against the Cowboys, and I think that kind of summed it all up.
Did you watch that Sunday night game, Giants and Chiefs, and just keep thinking, man, this is a completely different offense for the Giants than what we saw against the Cowboys last week? They looked like world beaters against the Cowboys just because everyone's running wide open. And the Chiefs said, hey, we're just going to just stay back and not let you beat us with Malik Neighbors deep. And that kind of worked.
I guess we can say this, right? They held Scatteraboo to a decent amount of yards.
Don't be knocking Cam Scatteraboo, pal.
The Cowboys you love your Cam Scatteraboo, boy.
I think the Giants love him. He's been one of the most productive rookie running backs in the league so far.
Yeah.
So Joe, on that point, you retweeted something, and I saw that, and I noted in my newsletter this week that Russell Wilson became the first quarterback in NFL history to throw for fewer than 200 yards in one game, for over 450 in the next game, and then under 200 yards in the next game. First time in NFL history that's ever happened.
Yeah, it's insane. And honestly, it's indicative, another kind of strike against the Cowboys right now. Russell Wilson's not even their starter anymore. They're moving to Jackson Dart, to be the starter moving forward. They announced that today. And so I think that's just another kind of damning note against Matt Eberflus' defense so far. And I guess the question moving forward is, can it be fixed? Is it scheme? Is it personnel? Brian Schottenheimer said changes are coming. One thing they're doing this week is they're doing some self-scout, which means that the offensive guys are going to kind of look at defensive film and be like, hey, this is how we were going to attack you. To be honest, I don't know how much that's even needed, because you just got to look at some of these guys running wide open. I even think, too, there was one play that I posted where I just think in this zone concept right now, in terms of what the players are doing, they are communicating, they are doing these things. But because I think there's a lack of disguise in their concepts, I think offenses know, hey, if we can read before the play, this is going to be some cover 3, or this is going to be quarters, or it's going to be cover 2 on this side, cover 4 that side. Like, I think that there are plays that you can run to put guys in precarious positions. They did a play on 3rd and 2, ended up setting up the Cole Kmet touchdown right before the half. And this was a 17-14 game at the time, where if you get off the field here, get a stop before halftime, you might even get a field goal from Brandon Aubrey and tie this thing going into halftime. Instead, they have their corners about 8 yards deep on 3rd and 2, their outside corners. And then they motioned into a trip set on one side that put Reddy Stewart in a tough position, where he had to kind of debate, okay, do I go to the outside kind of just out route they have, or do I kind of stay with this inside route? He gets caught in the middle of the sides and to stay at the inside route. Next thing you know, Rome Odunze is wide open, no one around him, gets a 13-yard gain that ends up setting up a touchdown before the half that changes the game.
All right,
Like I
let's
say,
let's
too.
move into this. You want to move into the schedule, Kevin, or did you have another
No, real,
question?
real quick, I want to do one thing more about the defense. To me, too, Joe, I don't. Kenneth Murray and Jack Sanborn playing, linebacker for you. They can't cover anybody. They rack up a lot of tackles, but they're not covering anybody and carrying these guys back to the secondary either, right?
Yeah, 100%. And my thing with Kenneth Murray, just kind of my perspective, is I see a guy who's incredibly fast that likes to read incredibly fast too. Like if you look at that play action touchdown to Cole Kmet before the half, wide open, right? And again, with some of these zone coverage, they've been so bad in zone coverage that sometimes it's hard to pinpoint exactly who was wrong or who was kind of at fault here. But that Cole Kmet touchdown, it was a play action, and you have Kenneth Murray reading play action right away and sprinting down in the line of scrimmage. Next thing you know, Donovan Wilson's kind of is not there, and it's a wide open touchdown for Cole Kmet. I think right now you can look at every layer of this defense in terms of the passing game and find problems. Their best pass rusher so far has been Kenny Clark, and that's not what they traded him. Traded Micah Parsons and got him to get. Frankly, their edge rushers have not supplied anything in terms of pass rush. They have 3 sacks combined through the first 3 weeks, and we talked about this before the show. But this if you have a pass rush, this is something that can hide up some of these inabilities in the secondary. And right now they don't have that. They're going to have to scheme it. I think they're going to have to send more pressure. They're going to have to go against the Eberflus grain in order, I think, to handle this Packers offense and get a win.
All right, I want to move into the schedule now because I've taken a look at the rest of the schedule, and 3 games in, they're 1-2, and we heard Jerry Jones say that this is still a playoff team in his mind, which we know we can't believe anything Jerry says, but um, I've got 4 more wins, guys. That's what I've got. I've got them going 1-1 in this stretch against the Jets and Carolina, both on the road. I've got them winning 1 of 2 against Arizona and the Raiders on their back-to-back Monday nights around the off week. I've got them winning maybe 1 of 2 against Minnesota and the Chargers, even though the Chargers are playing really well to start this year. And I've given them the Giants win on the road at the Meadowlands at the end of the year. I don't see any other wins. That's a 5-win team.
That's fair. I think all those games you pointed at, I mean, they're going to have to do things that surprise us based on their current trajectory. And to be honest with you, I don't think there's a lot of hope right now in terms of them actually pulling off those kind of surprises. And I know it's the 3rd defensive coordinator in 3 years, right? Because I think their offense has been good actually. And I think I think they actually have enough pieces without CeeDee Lamb to kind of get by offensively. I think if they stick to the running game and kind of keep that going the way Javonte Williams is running the ball and the way that their offensive line is designed, they're going to have some potential to score points. But I think they're going to have to score 28 to 35 points a game in order to win games. And that's the way the defense is going. And I haven't really seen a lot of optimism do it. 3rd DC, 3 years, there's value, there's credence to that. But it's not an excuse, as Jerry Jones said today. And they just look lost. You wonder if they look so lost that if one thing changes, that maybe there is kind of a bigger room for improvement because of that. Like if literally they just get on the same page, which I don't think they are, that maybe this can kind of open up things and limit them. If maybe they start scheming pass rush, maybe that can help hide some of the inefficiencies or the deficiencies in the secondary. They got Josh Butler coming back soon. Savone Rebels coming back soon, ideally. They have some pieces. Deron Bland is trending towards playing this week. There's some things, but I find it hard to believe that they're going to surprise us, to be honest, at this point.
Here's the thing, Joe, for me, and I thought that this game was a microcosm of all the Cowboys' problems. I did after the Eagles game think, wow, now this offense is pretty good, and then Dak played well the next week as well. But Dak is at his best when he's got a running game. He's a play action quarterback, and when he has the pieces, and when it was all there, it all looks great. Tom Brady even mentioned that when he gets all the pieces around him, he's really good. He's a top 10, 15 quarterback. But as you said, the problem is that it's hard to beat anybody with a running game to try to score 30 points a game, 35 points a game. As you said, and this team is going to give up 30 points a game. I don't, there may be a couple of times they don't do that, but the way this defense is playing right now, that's going to be the issue. That takes them out of the offense they want to play. And I think, and to me, that's the problem is that I don't see any hope for them because the defense is so awful that it's going to require Dak to throw the ball 50 times a game, and his track record is such that it shows that the Cowboys don't win when he does that.
And if he's got to throw that, if he's got to sit back there and try and throw that much, it's going to expose him to potential hits. And we know that Dak at this point in time has you know, he's
And
fragile.
they,
I mean, there's no
well,
other way to
and
put it.
they can't protect him. The tackles they're not good pass blockers, so they got
So
to get the
Kevin,
ball out fast.
is
You know.
5 wins accurate?
Well, I said before the season, I think I can't remember. I said 8 or 9. It was one of those two. And I just really, yeah, I think 5 wins sounds good. And frankly, I think it's the best thing that could happen to them, because they were a borderline playoff team as it is. And that's the last thing you want to be is a borderline playoff team. You need to go in the tank here and get yourself better draft position and utilize these picks. If Jerry's talking about he can make 5 players out of that Micah Parsons trade. He needs to make about, I don't know, 10 players out of it at this point.
Yeah, I think a top 5 pick is not out of the question, but I think it could do wonders for them. The guy I just kind of keep coming back to is Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. I think that guy is a multiplier in terms of his impact. That's someone early on, Cowboys fans, I'm watching as a potential top 5 pick and someone you should probably want because he's a guy that can fix a lot of mistakes. And I think right now they have a lot of holes in their defense.
Oh, they do. No question about it. All right, Joe, that's going to do it. We appreciate you taking the time. There's a lot of stuff going on with this team, a lot of stuff to talk about, and a lot to cover. And we
None
could
of it
spend
good.
an hour talking about all that, but
None of it good.
none of it's none of it's good, man. I don't. I will say one last thing, one last question, Joe, and then just give me a short answer on this one. Do you really think that Jerry thought the team was going to be this bad going into this season?
No, I don't think he thought so.
No, he never thinks so, though, right? That's the problem with Jerry, and I've written this 1,000 times. His worst quality is his optimism. He always thinks everything's going to work out, and that's the problem. You have to prepare for the worst, and Jerry never does. It's a mess. All right, thanks, Joe. We'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll have Calvin on next week, but we'll see you back in 2 weeks. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, so the Rangers, as we discussed earlier, gone through an end of the season. I think 7 losses in a row after they were playing pretty well there and got themselves back in contention. They'll lose 7 games in a row. I mean, it just kind of sums up this team, doesn't it, Evan? I mean, I said in my newsletter the other day, it's like the Rangers this year. Following the Rangers is like driving behind somebody who keeps tapping their brakes all the time, and you, for no reason. And the next thing you know, everything you're going along really smooth, and the next thing you know, you're in their back seat. And that's what this Rangers team feels like to me. I don't know that I've ever seen a team that could play well for a while and then play so poorly for a while. And I guess the question for me I want to ask you straight up top is this a reflection of Bruce Bochy getting the best of what this team is, and so therefore a great reflection on him and his managerial abilities to coax this out of a team that's really not that good? Or is this more a case of a team that, boy, just severely underachieved and not a good reflection on the manager?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at this team as a reflection on Bruce Bochy so much as I just look at it as a reflection on the talent here. That look, Jonah Heim has gone. We've been over this, right? Jonah Heim has continued to regress. Adolis Garcia has continued to regress. The guys who have been here, with the exception of Corey Seager, have all kind of continually regressed since the end of 2023. And I think it's more a personnel issue than it is anything else. Now, could Boch insist that these guys play small ball? Yeah, but I don't think Adolis Garcia is going to be any better of a small ball player than he is as a big swinger. I just think that the personnel does not fit. And the thing for me that the Rangers have to do this offseason is they have to become more disciplined at the plate. They are just not smart hitters, is the only way I can sum it up.
I want to take it a step further than that because if you watch the teams that come through, and I don't see a lot of National League teams, because basically I just watch the Rangers. Uh, but when teams come through here, they're just full of athletic guys, guys with speed. And on this team, other than the outfielders and Simeon, who's running? You know, you got you're slow at third, you're slow at short, you're slow at first, you're slow at catcher. I mean, and almost epically slow at those positions. Unathletic guys to boot. And then it's not like the outfielders are speed. I mean, even Adolis here at the end, he was not a speed threat anymore. So that
No.
left you basically with three guys who were running out of that entire lineup. And so when the I think that this calls for just a rethinking of everything. Chris Young seemed surprised this year to learn that the ballpark now is a pitcher friendly ballpark, right? It's no
Yeah,
longer.
and nobody's come up with a reason to explain that.
No, nobody has. And so, but to me, you got to play with realities, right? If this is what it is, even a guy like Wyatt Langford, to me, Wyatt Langford, and he may end up being a 30-30 guy. And if he is, then that's terrific. Then that's everything you could possibly want from him. But to your point about to me, in plate discipline is also just go with the pitch. Wyatt's trying to pull everything. I mean, he's taking pitches on the outside corner of the plate, and I guess he's so proud of his batting eye that he thinks he's going to get that call all the time. But how about just poking that ball to right field, with two strikes? I mean, I need to see more of that. I need to see guys not only just being more discerning about what they're swinging at and not hacking so much, but I need guys. That's what we talked about with Cody Freeman all along, right? He's determined. This pitch, if I got two strikes, I'm going to right field. And I see that on occasion. Adolis has done that on occasion. Josh Young has done that on occasion. And they do it occasionally, but they don't do it all the time. It just ought to
I,
be an automatic, right?
I just feel like there is a tremendous lack of self-awareness amongst these hitters, and I think the Rangers need to have some really blunt exit interviews with some of their players, in particular Jake Berger and Josh Young, two of the most indiscriminate swingers on the team. Berger, we're talking about a guy with a 270 on base percentage. A 270 on base percentage. They have 6 players with 200 or more plate appearances and sub 300 on base averages. They need guys to reach base. And I went back last week and I looked at when this team took 4 walks, what their record was. When they took 4 or more walks, they're a very, very good team. And they just refuse to take them. They refuse to battle pitchers. They think they're going to slug everything. Still 155 games in, and they're just not. So they're going to have a real come to meeting with these players about, you guys have to be a little bit more self-aware. You've got to understand that you can't drive everything.
Well, I'm just going to wonder though, because look what they did with Josh Young. They sent him down. They embarrassed him. Sent him down, brought him back, sat him. During games when he was here, and he still doesn't do it. And so to me, it's like it's not. He's not a kid. He played in college. He came up. He's been around. He was an all-star. He's been on he's been on a World Series team. He's won a World Series. All of that to me says that maybe this is just who he is, and this is who he's going to be, and
I think
maybe
that's a real part of the calculus right now is that they've got to consider that, and that would not surprise me if the Rangers are willing to potentially include him in a deal this offseason, because I think that they are getting to the point with him where they're like, either he's stubborn or this is just who he is.
yeah. Well, these will be the decisions that have to be made because, and then of course the bad part of it too is the team that carried them all year was their pitching. Well, how much longer is that going to happen? Because Tyler Malley's not coming back, right?
I would highly doubt it.
Yeah, is Nate Eovaldi going to come back?
Oh, Nate Eovaldi's here on a 3-year
Oh, that's
deal.
right. He's on a 3-year deal.
You
So,
know, I
but
mean, the only way
so
Nate
he
Eovaldi doesn't come back is if the Rangers say we're going to tear all of this down and trade everybody.
and
But
Chris Young is not doing that.
I don't believe he would do that. No. So
No.
you're going to have a rotation. Look, I think your rotation is going to be in pretty good shape next year with Eovaldi, DeGrom, Jack Leiter, potentially Jake Latz. Cody Bradford should be back in the middle of the season. And I'd like to see a start from Jose Corniel in the final week of the season because he's pitched really well after coming back from Tommy John surgery. He was their minor league pitcher of the year in 23. I'd like to see him make a start too. And I mean, we haven't mentioned Kamar Rocker, but I think that there's obviously room for growth for Kamar next year.
Well, and I would rule out the possibility for Kamar Rocker at some point as a closer. Would you?
No, I think that that's certainly a potential possibility for him. But
Yeah.
I think you're going to exhaust all opportunities as a starter before you move him into that role.
I think that Chris Young's big goal in the offseason is going to need to be we need to rethink our offensive plan and what we are and who we're trying to be. And I just feel like, especially if your pitching is this good right now, and I think the pitching will always be good under Chris Young. I think he has an understanding of it. Obviously, having been a big league pitcher, they seem to have turned a corner in the organization, which is a crazy thing to say after all these years, but they seem to have done that. And you're playing in a pitcher friendly park. Well, then play to that. If you know you don't need to be beating people 10-3. You know that they've shown that if they can score four or more runs, they're pretty good. And I think you can get four or more runs if you've got Corey Seager playing. 140 games, which I don't know if that's unreasonable to think he's ever going to do that again.
Well, this will be the third straight year he hasn't. So
I know. So maybe that's who he is too. I mean that's part of the issue involved in that. And yet he still put up what 6.1 WAR.
yeah,
So he's still a terrific player when he plays, and he makes an impact on the team. But there was not enough guys. I think who was second in WAR on this team is Wyatt Langford, like at 3.1, something like
yeah,
that,
yeah,
in the
And
threes.
Simeon's third. So
And Simeon's third, and then all we're
well,
talking about is how
among position players, yeah.
among position players about how poorly he's played this year, and who are you going to replace him with? Because I have to tell you, I think and we've talked about Josh Smith before, and obviously he's a nice player, and I like Josh, but it just seems to me that he wears down at the end of these seasons, being forced to play as many games as he's played. He's just not an everyday player. I don't feel like. I think
I
he
believe he's a championship player as a utility guy used between 350 and 400 plate appearances,
absolutely.
measured out over the course of the season.
I agree
As
with
an
that.
everyday player, I think he's not a championship player. Doesn't mean you can't win with him playing every day, but I don't think he adds championship value to you.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that Chris Young has to consider as he pursues what need to be some offensive changes going forward are how measured he is in all of this. The one thing I think that I think it's possible that in the way they kind of tried to address the offensive thing this year. They looked so much for slug, 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 and guys who hit fastballs that maybe they did overlook the on base component a little bit. I think that's a little bit cloudy because Jock was supposed to be an on base guy and got off to such a horrible start that it never really was going to happen. But I would want them to not go overboard on the hey, we played well when we played small ball with a bunch of rascally little gritty guys. They still need talent, and they need guys who are talented players who can both do damage, but who also understand situational hitting. And so I think that takes a very measured approach.
Wouldn't hurt if of the things you wanted to see in the offseason. Jock Peterson maybe dropped a few lbs too.
Yeah, although yes, I 100%. But I will say this: Jock's OBP is now 100 points higher than his batting average. It's still none of it's acceptable, but since he's come back from the injury, he's certainly been a an adequate player. But yes, to say all of that, you'd love to see Jock a little bit more slimmed down, and you'd like to see him next year bring his gloves to the field because you're going to need to use him occasionally at first base or in the outfield to get Corey Seager some DH days, I think.
Well, I think that's a great point, and that to that point, that's why he needs to lose some weight, get in better shape. I mean, that's just look, it's just pitiful. Those two guys, the Jock Peterson, Jake Berger, I thought those were great additions to this team, and both were. Peterson was a disaster. Berger wasn't a disaster, but but not good. And I guess the only thing that saving grace of that is that Nate Lowe didn't have a good year either. So it's not. I
No,
don't know that he would have made any difference if they'd held on to him.
no, I don't think so either. And listen, I think that Jake's wrist is more severely injured than he's let on. You know, he missed some time with that sprained wrist. It wouldn't surprise me if we find out at the end of the season that there was some kind of surgical procedure that's going to happen. But all that said, even more so, you've got to be a more discriminate swinger than he is. And a 270 on base percentage when you're a 240 hitter, that's just not going to cut it, man.
No, no, it just there's just too much of everything here, Evan, with this team that just and I know that look, and we hadn't even talked about whether the manager's coming back or not. I think it's clear to me the manager wants to come back. Um, it's a question of whether the general manager wants to bring him back, frankly, at this point. And I think everything is probably on the table. I think when they were really coming, back and making a run at the if they had finished 2 games out of the wild card, I think that it would have been a no-brainer that Bruce Bochy would be back. This, losing streak at the end of the year is not good. It'll take Chris Young some time. He needs to take some time before he makes any decisions about what he wants to do. I think he gets a little emotional about these things sometimes. I'm not saying he makes emotional decisions.
But I will
I don't
say
think
this,
he's done
Kevin,
that.
his hand could be forced here because, there are going to come managerial jobs. There are going to be managerial jobs that are open within the first couple of days after the regular season ends. And Skip Schumacher is going to be a candidate for all of those. And so if he wants to retain Skip Schumacher, then he's going to have to make a decision on the managerial thing. And I think it does put his hand, um, or it does force his hand a little bit. So I know Chris Young has spent plenty of time thinking about this. I think I don't think that Bruce Bochy is in any way, shape, or form the problem here. I think it has been the hitters and the hitters alone. I think he's done a great job of managing this bullpen. I think all the strengths that he usually brings, Bruce Bochy has brought. Um, but if in Chris Young's mind there is any doubt about whether or not he wants to bring Bruce Bochy back, and he's convinced that Skip Schumacher is the guy, then that probably is his answer.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to record. I'd rather have. I know what Bruce Bochy can do, and we know what Skip Schumacher can do. And he was manager of the year, right?
Yes.
Once. So, but he also got canned. So when you have a Hall of Fame manager who's won 4 World Series, including for you,
Yes.
to me, I'm not too quick to give up on something like that. I'd love to see what Bruce Bochy can do with a team, as we talked about. This needs to be not only a more discriminating team at the plate, but they also need to be more athletic in my mind. They just in an era not only when that we talk about with the ballpark, but when it's so easy now to steal bases, you have to have speed. You have to be presenting something that is going to cause a problem for other teams. Just like when we talked, of course there was the big play where Tony Beasley sends Jonah Heim in Houston, and it's a short left field and all that, and probably anybody got thrown out, but certainly Jonah Heim was getting thrown out on that play. There's no question about that to me. So I mean, he's a catcher, and I get that, but there are catchers who've got some speed too. I just think that this team
I'm
needs to
not
be more
worried about
athletic.
speed at catcher. And I
I'm
will
not
say
worried
this.
about it, but they got to be more athletic. There just has to be it just has to be. You can't watch baseball and you can't watch teams and not see the teams full of athletic guys, and the
Well,
Rangers
look,
just aren't.
right now you've got a lineup that you've got Jock, who is a little bit overweight. You're playing Rowdy Tellez, who is a big
Little,
barreled guy, and you're playing
yeah,
Jake Berger, who's a big shouldered guy. And so they don't look all that athletic. But I will say this: they rank eighth in the major leagues in stolen bases this year. And their stolen base percentage has been better than most of the teams with 130 or more stolen bases, which is where they're at. So there are a number of things that the Rangers have to consider, one of which is their intended lineup from the start of the year never made it onto the field together, not one game. And so that does have some impact. Um, there are There are some issues that they need to address, though, I think most significantly with the idea that this offense can't be all or nothing if those guys don't have another way to get on base.
Yeah, no
Because
question about it.
that's what leads to that's what leads to long losing streaks and then rebounds with good winning streaks because you've got solid pitching, but it's all dependent on how hot your offense is that week.
Yeah, no question. All right, that's going to do it for the Rangers segment of our podcast. I want to get over and talk some college football here. As we were taping this on Tuesday, the news was released that Mike Gundy is fired at Oklahoma State. That's not a surprise. They're off to a terrible start, and they had a terrible season last year. But if you know anything about Oklahoma State football history, Mike Gundy is far and away the greatest coach in the history of that program. I think at one point, 19 winning seasons in a row, and they were awful in the last century before he got there. Just a miserable program. Uh, Propped up every once in a while by the likes of people like Jimmy Johnson, who had some success there, and there were other people who had some success there, but they didn't last for very long. And if you've seen their facilities and what they had to deal with, uh, and then when you take consideration that Mike Gundy was also a great player at Oklahoma State, I'm sure that there were people who felt like this was going to be hard to do, even though Mike's not the most likable guy either, and that probably didn't help him any. But it was time for him to go. As Dabo Sweeney may be on his heels here at any moment. We'll see what happens there. You're seeing quick triggers more and more often now in college football, where coaches getting fired early in seasons, and that used to never happen. Sometimes they would fire a coach at the end of a season, but rarely after 3 or 4 games. And now that's happening more and more. So that'll be big news here to see who Oklahoma State goes after, to replace Mike Gundy. That's a you know that's not a easy place to win. You ever been to Stillwater, Evan?
I have not been to Stillwater.
I'll tell you what, you got to be trying to get there. I'll say that. It's not something you just stumble upon easily. So
Is it any harder to get to Stillwater than it is to Fayetteville?
no, Fayetteville's a lot easier to get to. It's a 5-hour drive to Fayetteville. From
It's a
here.
is it not a 5 hour drive to Stillwater from here?
I don't think so.
Yep.
It's not. Fayetteville's at least in the hills, and it's pretty up there, and then they have that kind of that appeal. There's just a lot of issues that Oklahoma State has that Oklahoma doesn't.
It's a
Number one,
4 hour drive from here to Stillwater, but whatever you say, Kevin. You just
well, I don't know.
whatever
I'm
you
still
say, Johnny Razorback. It's okay.
Johnny Razorback.
I know you're a big Razorback guy.
Well, both of my girls, my wife went there, and both of my girls were on the Palm Squad there. So, yeah, but you know me. I don't have any allegiances to anything. Even when I would go to the games and the girls, were doing stuff, I couldn't even cheer at the games. I cheered for the girls. I thought they were great, but other than that, not so much. But anyway, that'll be interesting. So I thought
Let me
about
tell
this,
you this: I
Evan.
took my family to the Ranger game over the weekend, and you know who didn't cheer? Me, because I went to the game on Sunday, and you would have thought that you were at a nothing happened in the game.
No, nothing. That's what's going on now. Nothing. But Evan, I was going to ask you now. I think the same thing is happening this year in college football that happened last year. We talked all year long about what a great year it was. It was so unpredictable, and there were no dominant teams. I don't see any dominant teams this year either. I mean, Ohio State's really good. Oregon's probably good. Georgia looks good. And we'll know here pretty soon when they play Alabama and how good Alabama is too. But I think this is maybe the new norm, because of what we're seeing here in college football with NIL and with the money, the $20 million that schools can now pay to their student athletes if they want to, a maximum of $20 million. I think this has been the great leveler,
Well, I think it's a
and then the
great
transfer
leveler
portal.
early in the season. I think it levels things more early in the season, and you're getting more teams now playing these showdown games early in the year. But look, the thing with NIL for me, Kevin, is you're moving in and out whole rosters, and there's some time to acclimate and adjust. And I think it's going to be on teams that are able to adjust the quickest and acclimate and work together. And so I think, you get to week 6 or 7, there's going to be a different picture. But look, if college football is the same as it was last year, and I know the playoffs weren't all that great, but if college football is the same as it was last year, by goodness gracious, I'll be very happy because it was a great season to watch.
Well, there's no question about that. We just locally here, we've seen so far the Aggies played really well against Notre Dame. They made some mistakes, and that's the thing about that. And I don't really know how good Notre Dame is this year. They didn't look very good. They look indecisive about a lot of things they want to do, and I'm not crazy about the quarterback. But A&M didn't play their best game against Notre Dame, and they still won. And so on the road, which is really impressive. So I'm interested to see how the Aggies are going to develop here. Texas 55-0 win over Sam Houston meant nothing, meant absolutely nothing. We saw what Arch Manning did last year when he played, below caliber teams like Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State. Uh, and we've seen what he's done against big teams. If he can just have a little more composure here, we'll have a better idea of what he's going to do. But they still got another week before they play Florida. I don't know that
You
that was
said
good.
Florida was going to be their first big test. I don't know that it's going to be that.
No, I don't know that either. You're playing at Florida, and that's a little bit something. And so that we'll see. I mean, it's better than the teams he's been playing since they lost to Ohio State.
But they could
Certainly.
be
So
playing. You talk about guys who are on the hot seat. They could be playing a team with a new coach by then too.
well, they could. As Billy Napier is probably on his last legs there at Florida, and that's always the other thing too, right? Don't make that mistake. If your guy's questionable all year long and he wins a couple of games late, don't give him the contract because it'll just go bad again the next year, and then you'll say, "Oh, I wish we had not done that, and we just cost ourselves a lot of money." That's a bad mistake.
I want to
Uh,
talk about one thing before we get out of college talk. I want to talk about one thing, Kevin, because you were at the last Iron Skillet game, and
yes, sir.
I did believe I texted you after the game and said that Sonny Dykes is weird. Um, and I want to talk about this quote that you. What did you ask him about the skillet?
My point was that there's been three skillets that we know of in history, right? And that's just the ones we know of. Who knows how many there have really been? But they haven't taken good care of them. It's a lot like John Blake and the Silver Boot, as we remember once after they had played in Houston and they won. John just dumped it into his trunk, right? And when he got to back to Arlington, he pulled it out in pieces. So
That was the glass
that was the
version. Yeah.
glass trophy. Yeah, it's like that's who you want taking care of your fine china, right? It's John Blake.
That was
Uh,
a. They've since moved to a silver trophy. So yeah,
so he could just bang away on it.
but I
Uh,
believe
so so that was the question I asked after the press conference was that so I mean so basically you've got this trophy now for eternity. So what are y'all gonna do with it? And he said I'm gonna get take a sledgehammer to it. I think his point was he was trying to be funny. It wasn't real funny, but I gotta tell you, if you're in there in those TCU press conferences, I mean some of us are in there just trying to get quotes, something to liven up this copy. And there's some people in there who asking about the fifth string left tackle, you know, uh, and determined to get to the bottom of that situation. And and then when Sonny says something remotely funny, they just sit there. They don't think it's funny. So anyway, I think he was just trying to be funny. I think he was trying to also show his disdain for the whole series. He couldn't care less about playing SMU. He's glad they're not going to play SMU anymore. I know everybody thinks that there's a possibility that the series could be revived if in the next wave of realignment, which of course there will be one at some point, and in the next one would TCU and SMU be lumped together again. So we'll see if that happens. I hate to see these things end. Everybody hates to see it. They tried to sell the
except the
point that
coach, obviously.
well, yeah, they tried to sell the point that nobody cares about this stuff anymore. That's what Sonny said before the game, and he didn't want to talk about last year's game when he got kicked out. And that's what I love about Sonny. He was perfectly honest afterwards. After the game, he said, "Yeah, I got caught up in the hype last year, and I cost us the game." I mean, what coach says that? I thought it was good that he did, and he admitted it. And then the fact that they had a record turnout in their student section, more students came out for that game than in any time in their history, which kind of suggests to me that the students were into the fact of that. And then one of their best players, Eric McAllister, who caught 3 touchdown passes, should have had 5. Got ripped off by one by the refs, and one when the SMU player stole it right out of his hands in the end zone. Um, he said, "Well, yeah, we see we see SMU players all the time in the offseason. We all live here. It's not that far away, and yeah, you want bragging rights." And it's like, well, yeah, that's exactly right. That is exactly right. But they were trying as hard as they could not to say that before the game. So yeah, it does mean something, and that's good. I'm glad they finally all realized it. It's a shame it won't happen anymore because I got to tell you, how many games is SMU going to play now against people here that you really care about? Obviously, you care about playing Clemson and playing Miami and playing Florida State. Yes, those are all great games, but they're not rivalry games.
No.
And the games they're going to replace SMU with on the schedule is going to be like Stanford and in southeastern Louisiana and Duke and who cares? I mean, Duke's already on the schedule, but I mean, it's just ridiculous to me to think that wasn't a question of personality. It's just a personal decision, not a professional one.
Well, and who's TCU's rival if not SMU? I mean,
Baylor. Baylor's a rival. I mean, that's the funny thing is that's even an older rivalry than SMU is, and it was called the Revivalry because the two Christian schools, and it's a good one. It was really good when Art Briles was at Baylor and Gary Patterson was at TCU. Two coaches are a little bit off kilter a little bit, and both of them very good coaches, very good at what they did on the field anyway. So yeah, it was a big rivalry for a few years because of that, uh, and it still is. So that's a rivalry. But this was you're right down the road from each other. I mean, it's 40. They're 40 miles apart. There's not a lot of that in college football, right? Where they're that close. There's just a
there's not, and
handful.
they're not that close, and they should play every year, and they should play in an event type of game, or maybe not. Maybe on campus is better for those two, but anyway, those two should play, and it was just disappointing for me to hear that Sonny thought that it was a good thing that rivalry was ending.
Yeah.
Rivalry games ending is never a good thing. What was the best thing for about Texas joining the SEC is that they're going to play A&M again.
Speaking of which, when we'll end with this, they came out with the new 9-game schedule the SEC came up with. They said that all right, these are the permanent rivalry games inside the SEC, and so they got it right with Texas. With Texas, they're going to play every year. They're going to play Oklahoma, and they're going to play Arkansas, and they're going to play A&M. So that's perfect. All 3 of those games. But and I'm sure there's a mathematical formula why they couldn't have done this. But A&M and Arkansas, their permanent rivals were Texas, LSU, and LSU. Okay, I get that. That's pretty good. And Missouri. I mean, who cares about beating Missouri? Nobody.
But
Why
you've
is
got,
that a
I mean,
rivalry game?
but you've got to have that's like Georgia's. I think on Georgia's got South Carolina, Florida, and Auburn. But yeah, I mean that you've got to if you're going to have 3 teams on there, one of them's going to, in some cases, one of them's going to be forced a little bit.
Well, but that's my point is that now maybe I'm not good at math. That's why I majored in journalism. Why couldn't all 3 schools just play each other? That's their main rivals, right? That every year we're going to play. Each of us is going to this old Southwest Conference trio is going to we're playing all of each other every year. That's a better rivalry than any of. The LSU Arkansas one is kind of coming around a little bit, and certainly A&M and LSU that used to be a rivalry a long time ago, back in the Billy Cannon days. And so because A&M used to get some good players from Louisiana.
I think it's
So,
more about who are you going to make rivals for Missouri.
well, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, but that should be a permanent thing, and it's very interesting to me that they got it right for Texas. And it's doesn't it seem like in the end that Texas still gets what it wants? I mean, that was the whole issue for everybody leaving the Southwest Conference, or certainly was A&M for leaving the Big 12. Was that man? We're tired of Texas always getting its way, and in the end, Texas still gets its way. It is an amazing thing that still happens, and I'm sure that very aggravating to A&M and lots of other people. But we'll see what happens this week. This is still kind of another a little bit of a bleak week in college football. After that, we had the flurry of big games, and now some not so many big games this week. We'll see what what happens in some of these, especially
You
like
got
A&M
Georgia,
Auburn.
Bama this week. You got Arkansas, Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I don't expect Arkansas losing to Memphis last week. My gosh, what a horrible loss that was for them. Speaking of coaches getting fired there, I think that that's going to happen. That trigger will get pulled at some point. Uh, and then I have to think about, and I can't remember what Rhett Lashley's contract situation is at SMU, but he's an Arkansas guy. Would he be attracted to that? You know, maybe not. It's certainly not as an automatic as it was before SMU got into the ACC. But if I was Arkansas, I'd sure think about it, about hiring him. They need that program needs a coach who's going to give them some offense. They need some entertainment. That's their in Arkansas, the Razorbacks. That's their entertainment. That's their program. So it helps when it's a little pass happy.
And the other two big games this week are Ole Miss, LSU, and Oregon, Penn State. And with that, I think we should get out of here.
Yeah, I was going to say one quick thing about that Ole Miss LSU. I picked Ole Miss in that game. I don't believe in LSU yet, and maybe that's because I just don't like Brian Kelly. But
speaking of the choir here,
yeah, that's right. All right, that's going to do it this week. We appreciate you taking the time to come in and listen with us for a little while. I'll be back next week. We'll find out how much worse it can get for the Cowboys, and maybe if
narrator's voice, a lot worse.
a lot worse. And maybe if a decision gets made, on the manager for the Rangers, and see if Bruce Bochy is going to come back or not. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.